Hello everyone, it's Matt here from Christopher Shaw Residential. Welcome back, and today I'm with my colleague James Tiller as usual, and we're welcoming on a special guest today. This is Will Bartley from Frettens Solicitors. Welcome, Will.
Morning guys, how are you?
Yep, very, very well. Thanks for joining us. I know you guys are super busy, like most solicitors at the moment. So we thought we'd jump on a topic today, which is one we've not covered before, James.
No.
We thought we'd jump on a topic about holiday lets, something that is becoming very, very popular in Bournemouth, something we've certainly seen the last year in sales inquiries become very, very popular. And a lot of calls coming into us are on this particular topic. So we'll cover a few questions today that maybe will either scare people away from doing holiday lets or give them the information that they might need. So leading into this, on the last couple of years, we have seen a boom in the staycation market. Obviously, COVID has played a massive part in that, with people not travelling abroad. Bournemouth being a nice seaside destination, quite moderate climate, nice countryside, the sea, of course, means Airbnb short-term lets are becoming increasingly popular and are an attractive investment opportunity. But Will, is it all what it's cracked up to be?
I suppose there's two answers to that question. The short answer is no, and the long answer is also no. I think from a short-term perspective, it can be quite attractive in terms of quick cash. If your property is only going to be vacant for a couple of weeks, if you're going on holiday, whatever it may be, but often that leads to very quick neighbour disputes with the other leaseholders in the block, especially if it's a block of flats. And long term, there can be issues where you end up in court or in the property tribunal because of the breach of the lease. So, what we've been seeing is certainly what you've been seeing, an increase in Airbnb lettings inquiries and disputes between freeholders, leaseholders, management companies, etc. I think what typically happens in these situations is you'll have a leasehold owner of a flat. They'll let it out on Airbnb thinking it's no different to sort of a short-term 1 week let. I'm sure there'll be no issues. It's just a family coming for a holiday down to Bournemouth.
Yeah.
And actually what happens is that neighbours in the leasehold block, they experience noise nuisance. There might then be parking issues at the property. There might be disagreements in the hallway or rubbish left, etc., by the bins. That can quickly escalate into management company getting involved, freeholders getting involved, and what we've seen, what we've acted for, is actually doing Section 146 notices and then potentially forfeiture proceedings of that lease because of the wording that is often prohibiting such lettings, such as Airbnb lettings.
Just on that, Will, do you tend to see people that have come to you with issues? Are they new owners of these properties, or are they existing owners that have seen the Airbnb option as a way of, like say, making some extra cash? Is that something you've seen?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. So you will obviously have experienced landlords that are sort of dabbling in this for the first time. They might have a wide property portfolio where they've got some flats with tenants. They've got other flats that they're now starting to think about letting out on a short-term basis for sort of quick cash, etc., and high turnover. But at the same time, we're also seeing inexperienced landlords taking up property for the first time, especially a flat. It's more accessible. Doing that in Bournemouth, near the beach, and rather than letting it to a tenant with all of the sort of prescribed requirements that come with that, they're sort of going the Airbnb route, seeing how they get on with that, seeing how much money that can make them, and actually they're falling foul pretty quickly of the management company, the freeholders, etc., and then are facing large legal bills in terms of defending proceedings against them.
Yeah, I'm sure. So across the local conurbation, there's lots of blocks of flats, and like you've said, a lot of them will have restrictions on the holiday lettings. But why actually is that? What's the reason behind it?
So a lot of the leases, and this is specifically in relation to sort of a block of flats, rather than sort of individual houses or freehold properties, etc. But lots of flats will have leases. They'll all be very, very similar, and they'll have clauses in there that will essentially prohibit short-term letting. It probably won't say that, but it's done in a roundabout way. For example, it will be for only lettings of family dwelling, or not to cause noise and nuisance to neighbouring properties, not to diminish the character of the block. All of these things that essentially, if interpreted by the court, would essentially rule out Airbnb lettings because it's just going to cause too much noise, nuisance and disruptions to the other property owners that are living there. And a lot of the leases as well will have a cost recovery clause, whereby if you are the offending party in this situation, even if you go to remedy it, you may well be liable for the other side's costs.
Okay. Now, what if you are one of these landlords who have chosen to go down this route? What can happen if you get caught, or worse, if someone perhaps has taken out a genuine AST with the landlord and has then got caught out subletting the property on an Airbnb arrangement? So they might not even be the landlord that has done the Airbnb. It could actually be the tenant, which we have come across only once before, but it did cause quite a lot of issue, not limited to the landlord's insurance, but what impact could that have?
Sure. So, I mean, you're quite right to touch on insurance there. So, for example, let's say that it was the actual property owner that was doing the letting of the Airbnb. Obviously, they'd be in breach of their mortgage. If it was a mortgage property, mortgage company could potentially look to call in that mortgage, without delay, basically, for being in breach of that. The freeholder of the block, the management company, etc., could also look to bring immediate tribunal proceedings against you, and again, the cost that would follow on from that are going to outweigh any short-term income that comes from the actual letting of the Airbnb to them. I think in relation to finding yourself in a situation, if you're a landlord and you've let the property to a tenant under an AST, and you become notified by neighbouring properties or management companies, etc., that actually your tenant has sublet that on an Airbnb basis, even if it's just once or twice whilst they're away, and even if that property still remains in their usual tenancy, I think that you'd have difficulties, again, facing a very similar process of forfeiture, legal cost recovery, property tribunal, county court proceedings, etc. So what you'd have to do in those situations, if your tenant is continuing with those practices, is essentially end their tenancy first. And by doing so, if you open the communication lines with the freeholders and the management company and say, look, I didn't know about this, I didn't authorise it, it's not part of the AST, they can't do it, I'm ending their tenancy. You do that by serving an eviction notice to essentially say, look, you're breaching your tenancy. If you don't stop, we're going to have to evict you. And then you go off to court and get a possession order that way. So freeholders and management companies can be quite sort of flexible around that and understanding, especially in that situation where it's not you personally doing it. And I think if you were to say to your tenant, look, I'm going to have to evict you if you don't stop this immediately, most of the time it's not going to be an issue. But we've certainly acted for landlords previously. We've had to evict their tenants because they kept on doing this, unfortunately.
So, in dealing with sort of these types of cases, Will, what have you come across? What have you seen? Have you seen many examples of it in your day-to-day role, I suppose, day-to-day business?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, there's been an increase in inquiries over the past 2 years. I think with coronavirus being around, people have been more reluctant to go abroad on their holidays, and more people, especially in Dorset, in the Bournemouth area, etc., have been letting out their properties, A, to earn some cash because of furlough and cash flow issues, and B, they're also going away to similar things. They're going on an Airbnb, how best to fund that, but let your property out on Airbnb as well. But the issues that causes, especially with neighbour disputes and freeholder issues, are just disproportionate to the actual income that you're going to receive. And I think it's been widely reported in the news that the government and the council are cracking down on this. In terms of the inquiries that we've seen, we've seen all sorts of things in terms of what that property has been used for during that Airbnb letting period, even if it's been a weekend for hen parties, etc. Homeowners have come back on the Monday and it's been absolutely wrecked. Other people have experienced damage to neighbouring properties, especially when you've got balcony flats in Bournemouth. People are partying on the balcony, they're dropping glasses and wine bottles down below, it's causing damage to neighbouring flats, etc. Damage to cars when people are coming back from a night out. I think there's a bit of a stigma behind Airbnb, a bit like lads trips away, anything goes, we've paid for it, we'll do what we want for the 48 hours and then we don't have to deal with it because we don't live here. And it's often left to the landlord to pick up those pieces. And I think neighbouring properties aren't that sort of sympathetic to that situation, because the only benefit to anyone is to the landlord's pocket in that instance.
Well, thanks, Will. Some really useful information there, and we'll not designed this this discussion to put people off these investments. It's just to make sure that you understand what you're letting yourself in for. I think is why we've sort of wanted to talk about it today, and to make sure that you've got all the permissions and the requisite requirements that you need to be able to do it. Because, like I say, it can open up a whole can of worms if things go wrong. So thank you, Will. We really appreciate your time talking to us about this, and we will see you.
Yeah, no trouble at all.
Thanks, Will. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.